We're back. We have Stephen Cutler with us. We have a security expert, and we're talking about security standards. What do we know about security? How does it work? Now, the way you and I know security is quite simple. The policeman on the beat, di ba? Ganun lang eh. Or general purisima, what we read in the newspaper. But what exactly is security? Security is not necessarily ang pulis hinahabol ang, kung sino man na maloko or robber o kung ano man. Security is everything. It's a lot of things. It's risk management. It's preparedness for calamities. It's policy. It's control. It's a system, strategic management system. Let's go to the expert. We have Stephen Cutler. Steve, we have a problem in this country called the very powerful, the VIPs, the know-it-all, so to speak, who dictate or appoint other people into sensitive positions, even in positions of security. For example, we've got Mar Rojas, who ran for vice president and lost, who was in government, who we know is part of the elite, but who was appointed directly under a very sensitive Department of Interior and Local Government, which actually manages the civilian portion of what we call police and security, all under it, all falling under what you call the local government code. Now, I like to call them, I know it's not fair to them, but certain oligarchs who are at the system. Is security made or created in this country to suit the oligarchs, or is it suited the way you see it, or suited for the people, to protect the people, not necessarily just from petty crime, but one big issue with the Chinese, for example, kidnap for ransom, right? So, is security created for the rich and the oligarch, or created for everybody, based on your assessment?
I'm going to answer that in kind of a funny manner, and I'll say yes, because it's...
I thought so. Okay.
Most nations, critics in most nations will suggest that the laws and the police work only for the rich and try to oppress the poor. I personally don't see that. I suppose in individual cases that could be. But as a system, I think...
Not necessarily is what you mean.
Yeah, not necessarily. I think as a system, though, the laws in the United States, where I've heard this recent criticism coming up because of some issues with police killings of minorities and so on.
Racial crime.
Racial issues and so on. And this exact point was raised there. But in the Philippine context, I think what we have is a changing system, a changing dynamic. I think at one point, through the colonial era and up until relatively recently, I think perhaps the system was built to protect the elites.
Correct. The rich versus the poor.
And what I will call the imports contrasted with the locals, it was to protect the colonial powers. But we haven't been a colony since the mid-1940s at least, right. So 60 some odd years. Some people still have that attitude. I understand that. But I think as we progress and as we have grown over the last 10 to 15 years within this century, and I think what we're going to see for the future, is a much more fair and honest, what's called a rule of law, as opposed to a rule of men, which means that you and I, even if I'm very poor and you are very rich, we stand before the law the same. And I can rely on the protections of the law the same as you can.
But Steve, you already well know of the very poor judicial system that we have. It only takes 100 years to resolve any case in this country.
Well, and that's true. And I have heard the statistics where the average criminal case, 7 years, from filing till the time of disposition. That's entirely too long. But what I am seeing in the Philippines is that in the last century, I don't hear of people saying that anybody really cared, because the elites were saying, that's them, that's those people, it doesn't bother me, I can just pay money, I've got people that can take care of it. That was then. Now, what I perceive is much more that, and it's not perfect. No system is perfect. But what I perceive
They're getting professional.
is that we are getting much more professional. There are still pockets of problems throughout the nation, as there are in every nation on the face of the earth. But what I perceive is that whether it is judges or prosecutors, the police, the law enforcers, is that there is a new generation that's coming up, and they are much more professional, they are much more interested, and they are much more patriotic. What's good for the nation.
But are they getting the right expertise to guide them? Because, for example, I brought out that issue with Secretary Rojas, not for anything, but this man did not study security issues, while he was growing up. I mean, this is an expertise that you have devoted your life to, that you have lived, being in the FBI in America, going through the ranks, the 22-odd years you've been working with them, working strategic alliances, strategies, creating policy, understanding the system. I mean, here we put politicians, congressmen, basically governors, former mayors. I mean, we've got a former mayor who came from Tagaytay City that has one main road, and it's forever in traffic. And we put him at the helm, called the Metro Manila Development Authority, to run the traffic system in the metropolis. How can he do that when he could never even do it with a one-street city? I mean, he's a lawyer, politician who obviously wants to go on into becoming a senator. But shouldn't we get an expert, for example, in that field? Policing has its tentacles in traffic even. Yeah. So do we have the expertise that people on top, as you can see in this government, or in any other administration, not particularly Noynoy's government? But that's why I asked that initial question. Is security created for the elite, the oligarchs, or is it created for everybody, wherein you get proper professionals like yourself to come in and straighten things out?
Well, I won't say anything against or about any particular individual. Let me offer this, though, and that is that when you are the number one, the number two,
Right.
for example, a deputy of a particular agency or entity, a department, you really need something of the political expertise. You need to be able to see the big picture. You need to be able to develop policies. And that goes beyond the security expertise. Now, again, I'm not defending or I will not criticize or defend any particular individual, but I'm suggesting that at that top executive position, we do need executive experience, not so much the technical expertise. So perhaps what we need to make sure that's happening is that those top executives have some really, really good advisors.
Yes, consultants.
Professional
and consultants.
Who have a wide range of experience. Let me suggest that, for example, when I was still with the U.S. Embassy and with the FBI, one of the things that within the NBI and the Philippine National Police, there are a good number of, they're now senior executives, who are graduates of the FBI National Academy.
Whoa.
The FBI National Academy.
We've been teaching our locals.
They have actually gone to the United States and gone through schools, I'll explain, for about 3 months. The executives, some of the executives from the Philippine National Police and the National Bureau of Investigation actually go to Quantico, Virginia, to the FBI Academy. And they join 250 colleagues from around the world. Every continent except Antarctica is represented, and about 200 state and local police from the United States. And they go through classes on how to lead police entities, law enforcement entities. These classes are taught at the graduate school level. For example, if you need graduate school credit, the University of Virginia, which is a top school in the United States, you file your paperwork, and they have already accepted that range of instruction for graduate school credit.
Wow.
So it's very, very demanding. You have to do research, you have to do research projects, and so on. Then there are tours of U.S. federal entities in Washington, D.C. You get to meet with people from throughout the United States and throughout the world. So we have a number of NBI and P&P graduates now at the upper echelons of both entities that are helping to lead. In addition, again from the United States, I know Australia, I know Japan has done a lot of good work with both agencies. The United States, through a program called ISATAP, which is the International Criminal Investigation Training Assistance Program, has upgraded nearly, I think, over 2 dozen, more than 2 dozen Philippine National Police stations throughout the country in major urban areas, rural areas, north, south, Mindanao, and so on. Provided state-of-the-art computers, provided a good working environment so that you no longer have walls collapsing on police stations and so on, as well as top-flight training for every police officer, and I think the non-uniform personnel that are assigned to that entity as well. So they're getting some great training there. Another agency within the United States called the Anti-Terrorism Assistance Program, or ATA, has provided a lot of assistance, again, to agencies throughout, or excuse me, to P&P especially throughout the Philippines in cyber investigations. They have provided cyber investigation laboratories.
Yeah, that's good.
Which is excellent because we've got a tremendous risk of that right now. But they've also provided building collapse training, how to handle the disaster type, and equipment.
But these people that we are training, that go to America, well, Quantico, wherever, and they all teach, they get taught. My problem here is when we have experts or we manage to educate and generate more information and give them equipment. Here, the revolving door policy, for example, of the retirement age of 55 or 56?
57, well, 57 for P&P.
57 for P&P. I mean, right when they're becoming experts, we retire them. It's the same thing with the military. When I look at the U.S. and I look at the U.S. Armed Forces, even at the generals, these guys aren't 60, they aren't 50 years old. These guys have been around. And even if they get older and older, the people who are still there one way or the other, I mean, their expertise is being maximized, utilized, rather than retired. For example, General Purisima, before he was suspended, was in Brazil or somewhere training. I'm sure that's all in good faith and properly done, but he comes back, he faces a problem, he's suspended. When you have that, all that training goes to naught. Correct me if I'm wrong, especially when you do an early retirement of someone who's been training, learning, and whatnot. I see that in a lot of government agencies here. Won't security suffer if we keep retiring and placing younger guys who have to retrain again rather than have the expertise on hand all the time as they age? As they say, with musicians, for example, they become better with age, you know, that sort of thing.
I agree, and it's a balancing act, and that's one of the problems that we have, and I correct myself. The P&P's retirement age is 56, FBI is 57,
there you
NBI is 65.
Okay,
so
that's even better.
They do stick around for a while. But to go to the FBI National Academy, most of the guys are at the superintendent level. So that will be, you know, they have to go through superintendent, then senior super, and then up through the various general ranks.
I know, but
so
the
they'll
top,
be for a while.
But the one in the top honcho is an appointee, a woman appointee, a lawyer, a politician, actually. De Lima, for example.
Right.
She's a presidential appointee. This is not from the ranks where you have a professional security expert who's been working his life with it and who's sitting at the helm and directing everybody. Again, this is what I mean. You have from the top a political appointee, and that shouldn't be the case if I'm not mistaken.
As I understand it, at least, and I could be mistaken, but as I understand it, at least, Director Mendez of the NBI is a FBI National Academy graduate.
No, he's professional. He's career.
And that's correct. And he will, he meets almost daily with the secretary. So she's taking advantage of his
but when you
expertise.
in this situation, it works well.
Yes.
But it's not necessarily ideal because the upper echelon, or he who has the gavel, so to speak, is still the DOJ secretary, who is nothing but a political appointee, not necessarily a career official who is the security expert. Anyway, we'll have to take a short break.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, I've extended this portion just to get that out clear, because on the next episode, we'd like to tackle the issues today, and where Steve, for example, Cutler, will make recommendations on where we think we should be, or where we should be going towards security. We'll be right back.